In Havana, Cuba, and this is CNN.
The United States Supreme Court hands down arguably its most significant ruling in decades. And on this day after, anger and elation ripple across a divided nation. Outside the Supreme Court today, protesters railed against the court overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade decision. After nearly 50 years, American women no longer have a constitutional right to an abortion. And 26 states in this country are expected to enact laws outright banning abortion. For opponents of abortion rights and many conservatives, it is a breathtaking victory decades in the making, and one that seemed completely out of reach even just a few years ago. I want to bring in CNN Supreme Court reporter Ariane DeVogue. Ariane, you have been working overtime, needless to say. Let's start off with the immediate impact of this ruling and the confusion, since it will vary state to state. Even some states with trigger laws doesn't go into effect immediately. It's confusing.
Right, because Justice Samuel Alito said this issue is going back to the states. We know already that 26 states will soon, if they haven't already banned abortion. Some of those states had these laws on the books before Roe, so those just went back into effect. Others had trigger laws, laws that would be triggered to go into effect if Roe were to ever go down. But what's complicated here is each state, the trigger law goes into effect at a different time. And that's why we're seeing some confusion nationwide now as far as what's in effect. And there's one other fascinating thing going on. Just a couple of hours ago, Planned Parenthood said that it was going to state court in Utah because it was going to challenge Utah's trigger law by saying that it violated the state's constitution. And the reason I keep emphasizing the word state is this is no longer in the federal arena now. Everything is happening in the states, and that will be a big lawsuit to watch. And it's really changing the legal terrain.
That is fascinating. Wow, what a twist. There's a lot of scrutiny on the conservative justices from their confirmation hearings and what they said about their views on Roe v. Wade. Let's take a look at that.
I do not have a position to share with you here today on the whether or not that case was properly decided.
The legitimacy of the court would be undermined in any case if the court made a decision based on its perception of public opinion. It should make its decisions based on the Constitution and the law.
That's the law of the land. I accept the law of the land, Senator, yes.
As a judge, it is an important precedent of the Supreme Court. By it, I mean Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Been reaffirmed many times.
That's a case that's litigated. It could, its contours could come up again, in fact, do come up.
Several lawmakers, Pelosi, Collins, Manchin, they have said they have felt misled by Justices Kavanaugh and Gorsuch based not only on what they said in the confirmation hearings, but also in-person meetings.
Well, I have covered these confirmation hearings for years and years. Abortion is always front and center, and the nominee always responds to it by saying, I believe in this doctrine called stare decisis, and that legalese basically means judges don't like to too eagerly overturn precedent, right? Because the law needs to be stable, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really ridiculous at these confirmation hearings because the nominee is asked about abortion. The nominee says, well, I believe in stare decisis. But the thing is if you're a lower court judge, you are actually bound by what the Supreme Court does. But once you're in the Supreme Court, you're no longer bound by it, right? Because you're a Supreme Court justice. And we saw this today break through in a fascinating New York Times article, because do you remember Justice Brett Kavanaugh's bitter confirmation hearings, right? And one thing that really saved him was Senator Susan Collins said she sat down with him because he really explained to her how he wasn't going to overturn Roe. And today she really blasted him because she quoted some of the notes some of her own staffers took at the time in saying how he wouldn't do it. And he said, according to the notes, I am a don't rock the boat kind of judge. I believe in stability and in the team of 9. So she did this front page New York Times story today saying she was really misled.
Yeah, we tried to get her on the show. Unfortunately, she wasn't available, but clearly she is not happy, mad. Let's talk about what's going on inside the court, right? There's a lot of palace intrigue right now. You have reporting, though, about these tensions that are boiling over inside.
Yeah, we have really seen it in the last couple of weeks. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote a dissent in a big religious liberty case. And the last line of her dissent, she said, I fear what the conservative justices are going to do next. That's a very odd way, right, to end an opinion. And plus the fact she knows darn well what they're going to do next because she's sitting there and she's seeing draft opinions flying. So then we see Justice Samuel Alito. He struck back in that big gun case. Remember, the Supreme Court there struck down that concealed carry law. And in fact, the opinion will only impact a handful of laws. But the way it was written will change the way judges look at all sorts of other kind of laws and regulations. And the dissenters wrote a huge dissent about that. And they brought up mass shootings. They brought up all the other things that will be looked at differently now because of this opinion. And Justice Samuel Alito, almost out of nowhere, wrote this 6-page concurring opinion just targeting the dissenters and asking them why in the world would they bring up mass shooting in a Second Amendment case. So it was very odd, and you have a sense it's the end of the term and they are really through. They need to get out of town. But one more important fact, if the Supreme Court ends next week, and it might, right? We might see the end of the term. Don't forget, we've got Judge Ketanji Jackson, who will be sworn in because Breyer had said he'll step down. She is stepping into a really fraught atmosphere right now. It's just unprecedented.
I was going to say, we covered the court together for many years. A very different high court now than it was
really different.
Several years ago when we were covering it. All right, Ariane, excellent reporting. Thank you. Well, President Biden called the court's ruling a tragic error, and he also said it was a step backward for the United States.
Today, the Supreme Court of the United States expressly took away a constitutional right from the American people that it had already recognized. They didn't limit it, they simply took it away. With this decision, the conservative majority of the Supreme Court shows how extreme it is, how far removed they are from the majority of this country. They've made the United States an outlier among developed nations in the world.
Let's take a look at how the U.S. now compares to the rest of the world. In the last 25 years, some 50 countries have liberalized their abortion laws. With yesterday's ruling, the U.S. joins the ranks of Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Poland as the only countries to roll back abortion rights in that time. Already, 10 states have effectively banned abortions. In Europe, nearly every country has at least some abortion protections. Poland has some of the most extreme restrictions, yet even there, women can end a pregnancy if it is a result of rape or incest. Women now cannot do that in the states of Arkansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Missouri, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Utah, and Alabama. Well, the court's decision is already changing the lives of women across the country. CNN's Amara Walker spoke to a single mom in Jackson, Mississippi, who decided to seek an abortion but ran out of time.
Y'all gotta go get on the van.
There's no mistaking this mother's dedication to her 3 young boys. Handwritten Post-it notes can be found in every room of their home, guiding and encouraging them.
A lot of the things that I tell them are the words that get me through parenting every day.
Parenting for 34-year-old Amanda Furge has been a journey filled with difficult decisions.
I get emotional talking about, because we've been through so much. Even now, we still go through things.
Furge knows what it's like to be poor and pregnant, a single mom of 1 escaping an abusive relationship, living on government assistance with limited access to health care. She decided to seek an abortion, but she says she ran out of time.
I'm still dealing with the residue emotionally, mentally, economically, of not being able to secure an abortion.
Mississippi laws are already among the most restrictive when it comes to getting an abortion. On top of that, when she first sought one out, Furge says she was initially sent to an anti-abortion crisis pregnancy center. A waste of time, she says. And when she eventually found the right clinic, it was too late. So her second son, Mega, was born. He's now 7.
Furge says she has no regrets and she's trying her best to raise 3 boys.
Hey, well, you're here now. Welcome to the family. This is how we're rolling. That's Mega. Before there was Mega, there was science.
With Friday's Supreme Court announcement, a number of states are expected to further restrict access to abortion, affecting millions across the country. A shift experts say will disproportionately affect Black and brown women.
You and your sin
The Jackson Women's Health Organization, also known as the Pink House, is the last place offering legal abortions in Mississippi. It's named in the case. It's become ground zero for the abortion rights battle.
The opinion announced Friday centered around Mississippi's 15-week ban on nearly all abortions. A leaked draft ruling in early May triggered nationwide protests.
Stop the hatred, stop the violence, women and girls won't be silent.
It will be a decision that is rooted deeply in this country's history of racism.
Activists like Fatima Goss-Graves says the abortion ruling is especially damaging to poor women of color.
Black and Hispanic women made up roughly 59% of the people who reported legal abortions in the U.S. in 2019, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. And a recent report from the CDC found that Black women are 3 times more likely than white women to die from a pregnancy-related cause.
It will be felt acutely in the Black community, in other communities of color, and for people who have the least access to health care.
In Mississippi, Black people make up 38% of the population, but made up nearly 3/4 of legal abortions in the state in 2019, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation.
Abortion is not going to be illegal across the U.S. It's going to be returned to the states, and the state legislatures will decide.
Republican Mississippi State Senator Joey Fillingane insists this has nothing to do with race and everything to do with states' rights.
This would disproportionately impact Black and brown women.
And it would disproportionately save Black and brown children.
My biggest concern is that women are going to secure abortions, but they won't be safe.
Furge believes abortion access is about saving lives.
Minority women are going to die, and minority women are going to go to jail because we're going to find ways to meet our need.
She vows to keep fighting for safe legal abortion access for all.
Okay, let's see if it works.
While simultaneously embracing her reproductive journey.
It's part of my healing process too, is to be able to say, man, you really did not want to have that pregnancy, but you did it, and now look.
Amara Walker, CNN, Jackson, Mississippi.
And this just into CNN, the World Health Organization may be tamping down global concerns over monkeypox. A short time ago, the WHO declared monkeypox is not a public health emergency of international concern. Officials say the outbreak needs to be monitored and is, quote, clearly an evolving threat. The monkeypox virus is a less dangerous cousin of smallpox. It can spread through body fluids, monkeypox sores, or contaminated items like clothing and bedding. And ahead on CNN Newsroom, how the decision to overturn Roe versus Wade impacts Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy. I'm going to speak to her biographer, Irene Carmen. Also ahead, no regrets why Republican Rusty Bowers, who fought Trump's attempted coup plot, in his own words, well, he says that he would still vote for him today. And damaged democracy, 1 in 5 election workers now saying they're likely to quit before the next presidential election. You're in the CNN Newsroom.
Gangwon 2024. Come on. Gangwon 2024.
Gangwon 2024.
What do you see when you look at the surface? Just that, the surface. But dive deeper and new possibilities emerge. Essential intelligence from S&P Global takes you here, providing the data, risk assessment, and workflow solutions you need to plumb the wonders beneath. A better, more prosperous future awaits. It's yours for the seeking. S&P Global. Seek and prosper.
the ever-changing weather around the world, ever-diverse terrain and roads across the world. With Kumho Tire that has conquered all. There is no road you cannot go. Go with Kumho. Kumho Tire.
Flytrex works with drones, which are basically robots. You don't have to pay salaries to robots. And that way we can take the cost, make it an order of magnitude more affordable than using humans for deliveries, especially in the suburbs where the population density is too low to optimize for multiple deliveries in the same run. We can basically offer a free delivery to our customers and charge a very small amount from the different restaurant chains and retailers. So it's basically a win-win situation for everybody, getting you your meal hotter, faster, and in a more affordable way. And we're already servicing almost 10,000 families in North Carolina, making deliveries 7 days a week, every day, to people's backyards during lunch, dinner. We send Tylenol in the afternoons, diapers in the evening, just servicing whatever people need in their homes.
This is a really important story. My name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN.
Assalamu alaikum.
Day in, day out, you see the reality of people living through this.
Ничего страшного.
Okay.
This is the front line.
On a human level, you find courage, sacrifice. This is what life is about.
A lot of people are wondering why.
You see the worst of humanity.
Putin might use a nuclear weapon. Absolutely terrifying.
But you also see the best of humanity. My job is to be present.
The human cost is right here.
And to tell these stories.
We're talking about families.
That is the most important thing.
I'm Clarissa Ward in Ukraine.
This is
CNN.
Well, this week, the January 6th committee wrapped up its 5th public hearing. Committee Chairman Benny Thompson says hearings will continue in July after the House reconvenes. Joining me now is Philip Bump. He is a national correspondent for The Washington Post. Hi, Philip. So earlier this week, you wrote a piece titled, "Most Americans Think Trump Should Be Prosecuted. It's Not That Easy." Why is attempting to prosecute Trump an uphill battle?
Well, there are a number of reasons. So we obviously have the January 6th committee, which is doing a lot of work to try and establish evidence that shows that Donald Trump was culpable for what happened that day. They have targeted 2 specific criminal violations, potentially. One is conspiracy to defraud the United States, that essentially he had taken false actions to interrupt the counting of electoral votes. And then there's an actual obstruction of official business, which is that actual effort to stop what is happening on January 6th. But the January 6th committee doesn't actually file criminal charges. The best they can do is make a criminal referral to the Justice Department. And there's a very interesting article by Andrew Goldsmith in the New York Times, who's a former prosecutor, who outlined that the Justice Department's going to be wary of this. There's some obvious ones, like they need to make sure that they feel as though they have enough evidence to actually obtain a conviction, things along those lines. But obviously there's this overarching question, which is, what does it mean to obtain criminal charges against an ex-president of the United States? That is a big deal, and obviously something that has political connotations that, for however much everyone in the United States would wish that justice were exacted, independent of any political questions, there's no question that the Biden administration and Attorney General Merrick Garland are paying attention to it.
Oh, absolutely. There's this new ABC Ipsos poll out that shows nearly 6 in 10 Americans think Trump should be charged with a crime for his role in the Capitol riot. Are these hearings having an effect on the public?
Yeah, we've seen this slight uptick in the number of people who think that. I mean, obviously, it is not necessarily the intentional goal of the committee to try and prove that Donald Trump should be charged with a crime. They're not setting out necessarily to do that. They do feel as though that happened, though, and they're presenting evidence which suggests that Donald Trump was culpable for what happened that day. And obviously, there's a lot of evidence to that effect. People are now more inclined than they were previously to say that, yes, Donald Trump did something criminal in the way that he stoked the crowd that ended up storming the Capitol. And so, yeah, there's a lot of partisanship involved here. Democrats are a lot more likely to say it, only, a relatively small proportion of Republicans are. But even among Republicans, that number has climbed.
So earlier this week, Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers testified about how he refused to help Trump overturn the 2020 election. But just a day before, he had told the AP that despite it all, he would vote for Trump again in 2024. He discussed his comments with CNN this morning. Let's listen.
Will you vote for Trump again versus Biden? And if you're limiting the choice to those two, just because of the implementation of the policy, I would have to go with the one who would implement the policy. If you're asking me if I want Donald Trump to be president again, the answer is no, I don't. And I want options.
Is this a common sentiment among Republicans who acknowledge Trump's wrongdoings, that they'd still vote for him if given no other GOP option, or if it was between him and Biden?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and there are two things I'd say about that. The first is that this really underscores that for a lot of Republicans, they don't necessarily see what Donald Trump did after the election as disqualifying. They don't necessarily see it as something which should prevent him from holding office in the future if he is the Republican nominee. That said, a lot of Republicans also think, hey, maybe we should look for another Republican nominee. There's a reason that Ron DeSantis in polling this week actually edged slightly ahead of basically a statistical tie with Trump in New Hampshire, which Trump won by miles in 2016. Now DeSantis actually is about running neck and neck with him in that state. And part of that is, I think a lot of Republicans are reaching a point where they sort of had it. They've sort of had it with Donald Trump. They sort of had it with all of these clouds that are hanging over him. And they see that there are other options who will continue to advocate for Trumpian sorts of policies and, sort of a style of politics who aren't themselves actually Donald Trump.
All right, Philip Baum, thank you so much. Well, the three liberal justices on the Supreme Court say they feel, quote, sorrow for the millions of women who no longer have the right to an abortion, and warn the conservative majority may not stop there. We're going to discuss with the writer of a book on the late liberal justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, up next.
Going green in association with Kirloskar, Limitless.
Every week, we consume over 5 grams of plastic. I've just found a mere way to try and remove these from the environment and try and remove them from the environment such that we have less of them entering our food system and entering the environment in the first place. My name is Fionn Ferreira. I am 21 years old, and I am a student of chemistry at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. Now, more than ever, young people are in a place of power. We're seeing more and more young scientists getting taken seriously, their grassroots idea being scaled. And we're also seeing just more and more young people who are passionate about this problem. We, however, have to remember that while only 25% of the global population is youth, they are 100% of the global future.
I'm Hadas Gold in Jerusalem, and this is CNN.
These troops, they are Russian. I've spoken to the commander. He said they are now in control. Over that way. It's a secret location. They're going to fire on Russian forces. There has been a ferocious battle here. There's unexploded grenades everywhere. We're being shown the powerful American guns, giving them an edge.
You downplayed the US intelligence assessment. Do you now regret that?
I'm in Kiev right now, and it is under attack, Mr. Lavrov, from Russian forces.
I'm being told by our security that we need to get our flak jackets on.
No matter where you are in this country, lives are being shattered.
There are thousands streaming out. It is at least a chance to save their own lives.
Matthew Chance, CNN.
Exclusive. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson joins Jake for his first U.S. interview since surviving a no-confidence vote. Challenges at home and around the world. Live from the G7. State of the Union. Today.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
I want to highlight a portion of the joint dissent in yesterday's ruling that struck down Roe v. Wade. Justices Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan delivered a stark warning about their conservative counterparts, saying, "And no one should be confident that this majority is done with its work. The right Roe and Casey recognized does not stand alone. To the contrary, the court has linked it for decades to other settled freedoms involving bodily integrity, familial relationships, and procreation. Most obviously, the right to terminate a pregnancy arose straight out of the right to purchase and use contraception. In turn, those rights led more recently to rights of same-sex intimacy and marriage. They are all part of the same constitutional fabric, protecting autonomous decision-making over the most personal of life decisions." Joining me to talk about the decision and its implications is Erin Carmon. She's a senior correspondent at New York Magazine and co-author of Notorious RBG, a biography of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Erin, thank you so much for joining the show. I want to talk about this story for New York Magazine, where you write, "The dissenters say you're not hysterical." What most stands out to you in their 66 pages of remarks?
You know, I've read a lot of dissents in my time. Of course, Justice Ginsburg was famous for her dissents, but I think this one stands out for its clarity, its anger, its bluntness. Because of the unusual nature of how we learned about this opinion through the leak, I think that there was an opportunity for there to be a public conversation about all of the ramifications of the opinion, from what it would mean for other kinds of rights, such as the ones you highlighted, like same-sex marriage, the right to contraception, to how states could actually enforce this, whether within their borders or outside, and what are the risks to patients who are seeking abortions. And so as a result, I think the dissent actually listened. The dissenters listened to that debate and dialogue, and they also responded, I think, to some of the claims that happened in the last few weeks since the leak, saying, actually, certain rights will be safe. This is something also Justice Alito writes in his majority opinion. And also, don't worry, you know, this will just be a states' rights issue. That's something that Justice Kavanaugh wrote in his opinion. And so they actually directly address the claims that people who are worried about, for example, will folks be prosecuted for leaving their state lines, or will people for aiding and abetting be criminalized? Will same-sex marriage, the right to contraception, even sodomy bans be up for grabs? The dissenters, as you highlighted, make it very clear that they believe that because of the constitutional structure of those precedents, it is imminent. And if you read Justice Thomas's concurrence, which we didn't have from the leak, you can see that he's very openly asking for that to be so. And who knows if we have the votes today, but I think that the dissenters are warning that they're laying the groundwork for that to happen in the future.
Right. Alito said this does not go beyond abortion, but clearly Justice Thomas in his concurrence says it raises questions for same-sex marriage, same-sex relationships, contraception. We're talking about the dissent. You have extensively researched, written about Ginsburg. We know how she would have voted. You must have been thinking about what her reaction would have been if she could have written something in that dissent. What would it have been?
I felt like the dissenters were channeling her, and had, even though they were very much writing in their own voices, there were a few references to her. And the most important way in which they highlighted what she might have said is that even though Roe was decided on a basis of a right to privacy, it was later expanded to a certain extent in Casey, where there's a line in Casey that says that the ability for women to participate equally in our nation is tied to the ability to control their reproduction. And that notion that an individual is not being treated as a full adult unless they have full control over their reproduction was something that RBG believed passionately. And so in the dissent, they actually say that this is not just about a private right to make a decision on your own quietly or quote unquote with your doctor. These are terms that RBG really thought were not enough. She really thought that women could not be equal citizens. They could not stand equally in the face of the law if the state controlled for her whether to become a parent, when to become a parent. And that came out loud and clear. And there were also a couple of citations to the gender equality cases that she brought in the 1970s. So I think her colleagues were very much trying to keep that alive, keep those ideas alive in their own language while adding their own views.
So interesting hearing your perspective on that. Erin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, the baseless claims of election fraud spread by President Trump and his supporters will leave a lasting mark on democracy, including during the next presidential election, regardless if the former president ever runs again. I'll explain For the Record up next. And this weekend on CNN, you may know Arthur Ashe as a legendary tennis champion, the first black man to win the singles title in Wimbledon, the U.S. Open, and the Australian Open. But his legacy goes far beyond the court. The new CNN film, Citizen Ashe, premieres tomorrow night at 9 right here on CNN.
Everything is concentrated on the razor's edge. And you forget the score, you forget where you are. I feel that my body's floating within myself.
Arthur Ashe, bright young member of the United States Davis Cup team.
Some people think we are all brawn and no brains, and I like to fight the myth.
He started becoming a citizen of the world.
Arthur Ashe, the first black player to win the men's Wimbledon singles title.
He had evolved from someone who was analytical to someone who became more about direct action.
AIDS became another fight for Arthur, and he picked it up like he did every other cause.
He never forgot about his race, and when I say his race, I'm talking about the human race.
Citizen Ashe premieres tomorrow at 9 on CNN.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for a market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
Khadija Behzad. I'm the founder and CEO of Meet the Locals. Meet the Locals is a social Emirati tourism company. We are specialized in Emirati culture. We design and deliver authentic Emirati experiences. I noticed that many visitors are coming to the UAE and they are visiting the different attractions and they are leaving without getting the chance of meeting local people. We as locals or Emiratis in the UAE, we are only 10 to 11% of the total population. Locals can give deeper information about the culture, so tourists will get the information from the source. It's important for us to create such programs in order to interact with expats, whether they are tourists or residents.
You've seen this explosion of life, and life has come back because of a new habitat that's been created with a whole load of big animals. So we went from this very intensive conventional farming system to a free-roaming, animal-based habitat creation project, rewilding.
One of the things you can do is introduce free-roaming herbivores, and all of them, the way they disturb the land, the way they trample and rootle, everything that they do has a hugely important knock-on effect, a sort of domino effect for biodiversity. We've seen here some of the rarest species in Britain. An amazing species that we had never had here before is the turtle dove. And we're probably the only piece of land in the UK where turtle dove numbers are actually rising.
This butterfly is an incredibly rare butterfly. Here you can see it in their hundreds.
It's about kicking off natural processes again in a system, and then as human beings trying to stand back from it as much as possible and let nature perform.
To see a landscape in your own country and what you've been missing suddenly come to life has been this extraordinary revelation, this surprise, this feeling of just joy that we can do it.
Well, when we go vote in the primaries and the midterm elections and the 2024 presidential election, the fallout from the 2020 election and then President Trump's baseless claims that it was stolen will be right in our faces. Now, for the record, this week at the January 6th committee hearings, we heard from two former Fulton County, Georgia election workers. The mother and daughter testified about the many hateful and racist threats they received and how President Trump and his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, targeted them. The women were accused of passing a USB drive to each other in some kind of vote-stealing scheme, a scheme that never took place.
What was your mom actually handing you on that video?
A ginger mint.
Trump would keep going after them during a phone call with the Georgia Secretary of State. The women said the threats still haunt them 2 years later.
There is nowhere I feel safe. Nowhere. Do you know how it feels to have the President of the United States to target you? The President of the United States is supposed to represent every American, not to target one, but he targeted me, Lady Ruby, a small business owner, a mother, a proud American citizen who stand up to help Fulton County run an election in the middle of the pandemic.
Our free and fair elections only work because of hardworking and dedicated Americans, some of them volunteers. But why would anyone volunteer to be an election worker when this is what happens? Earlier this year, the left-leaning Brennan Center for Justice surveyed local election officials, and 1 in 5 said that they would probably quit before the next presidential election in 2024. That's not all. 1/3 of those likely to leave mostly blamed false political attacks on the election system, and more than half said they were worried about their colleagues' safety. In videotaped testimony shown this week, Ruby Freeman told the January 6th committee she went into hiding after the FBI told her she would not be safe until after the presidential election. Ms. Freeman stayed away from her home for about 2 months. She and her daughter weren't the only ones getting threats from Trump supporters. Listen to what election officials from across the country told the Brennan Center last year.
They had assault rifles.
A pipe bomb.
You're gonna get what's coming to you.
They threatened my life. Couldn't go anywhere without the police officers.
When we had officers on the roof of our building.
I've never had people so engaged and enraged about what we were doing just to ensure that people could vote.
Now, for the record, the next presidential election might not be handled by people with years of experience running elections. The folks who donated their time and workers like Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay Moss. And it's sad to say that is how the damage to democracy may already be done. You're in the CNN newsroom. What's next for Congress in this post-Roe reality? Democratic Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney warns we do not have a democracy if people don't have full control over their own bodies. She joins me live up next.
Today, we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
The missile struck right here. What is your interpretation of Putin's intention?
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers.
What does President Putin think he has achieved in Ukraine to date?
We just want to say stop to Vladimir Putin.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
What are you looking at for the future with these additional formations that you've talked about, and where? What are the UN and other countries doing for you? Is it enough?
It's crucial we make sense of what's happening.
We are doing this for our very survival.
What do you think a peace or a ceasefire or an end to this looks like?
And fully understand what's at stake.
We have will, we have guts, and we are fighting like hell.
Amanpour, weeknights on CNN.
Chicago's South Side can sometimes carry a difficult, if not dangerous, reputation.
The threats in our community are numerous. There's threats of violence with gangs, with family members. There's guns. There's inequities in the system where students can't even go outside.
But in recent years, a new problem has come to light: human trafficking.
Human trafficking is something that affects every single person, no matter what age, no matter what gender, no matter what identity. It affects every single person.
But inside the brick walls of the Curie Metropolitan High School, a talented group of students has decided to do something about it. The students are part of a collective called Performers for Change. They're led by dance instructor Melinda Wilson.
Yes.
For the students, it's a chance to express themselves while educating their classmates. For Wilson, it's a chance to bring what some might consider a taboo topic out of the shadows.
I hope that it gets teens to really understand the dynamic of how serious and horrific these crimes are.
From the tiniest warbler to the mightiest whale shark, nature is on the move, but natural paths are under threat. Now meet incredible conservationists, helping species cross highways, span flyways, and get from A to B.
This is nature's highway, and we must protect it.
Call to Earth, protecting nature's highways.
Saturday on CNN.
I'm Delia Gallagher in Rome, and this is CNN.
New York Democratic Congresswoman Carolyn B. Maloney says she has been fighting for progressive values her entire life, and she's not stopping now.
Ever since I've been in Congress, but the Supreme Court bulldozed our health care and our rights into the ground. We have to fight back with everything we have.
Congresswoman Maloney joins me now from New York. As we saw, Congresswoman, you were at a rally yesterday in Washington Square Park. What did you hear from people there?
Well, I was at several of them, Pamela. They're spontaneous. They are everywhere. People are outraged. They're speaking out. In fact, I'm missing one in Carl Schurz Park right now to be here with you. Women are angry. They are feel betrayed. They are afraid of what this change means to their lives, to their health care, to people across our country, to women. We are afraid. We know that more women are going to die. There will be abortions, but they will not be safe in many states. So the passion is deep. It is strong. The determination is really fierce to make sure that this is changed, and women will not stop until this is overruled, changed in some way to protect a woman's right to make decisions over her own body, including her reproductive health decisions.
What do you say to supporters of the Supreme Court decision who say, look, this is not a nationwide ban on abortion. This is just leaving it up to the states to decide, from their elected representatives to decide what's going to happen on abortion? What do you say to that?
Well, I would say Thomas said that this decision and removing privacy protections and overturning 49 years of precedent, that next should be access to contraceptions, to gay marriage, and on and on and on. So there's a lot of really anger, I would say anger and fear and determination. We know already that people are having problems with access to abortions in many of these states, and we fear violence at the clinics. We're hearing reports on that. We're hearing threats on doctors' lives. It's a very troubling and disturbing decision. It's the first time that we've overturned 49 years of precedent. They always say, oh, precedent, precedent, precedent. Well, they overturned precedent itself when all of these justices pledged, when they were being questioned by the Senate, they all said they would uphold precedent when they were on the court. This is, we're assessing what it means. We know it means more deaths for women.
I want to ask you why this is so personal for you.
I grew up in New York with great women leaders, and I know people who lost loved ones with back alley abortions. I know what it was like during that time. And in fact, Pamela, I announced for Congress on the day of the Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision, which put more restrictions on Roe. And I was at City Hall with Bella Abzug and Geraldine Ferraro and many other great women leaders, and everybody was furious, as we are now. And I decided I would run for Congress, because in our country we can stand up and fight for what we believe in. And now I feel that every woman and like-minded man should run against a pro-life Republican and turn it into a majority of pro-choice in the Senate, so that we can protect a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. I would say there is no democracy if we cannot make decisions about our own health care.
I want to get your reaction to what Senator John Cornyn of Texas, a Republican, tweeted out today in response to former President Obama, who clearly Obama disagrees with the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. He responded on Twitter, now du Plessis versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education, later adding he is happy that those were overturned. But he's basically saying, look, that was also precedent that was overturned.
Well, I support President Biden's speech. Was among the best I've heard him give. It was reasoned, it was based in fact, and I'm as outraged as he is, and every American should be as outraged. It has been a conservative Republican minority that has plotted for decades, chipping away at a woman's right to choose. For many years I served in Congress when the Republicans were in charge. I kept a scorecard on choice. I got to 350 votes that passed the House of Representatives that chipped away in little ways going after Roe. Well, with this decision, They are bulldozing it into the ground, absolutely overturning it. Very few things have been overturned, something that is essential to women's health. Believe me, this is one of the worst decisions ever in the court. It was political. I am sad for the Supreme Court. They lost a lot of credibility. They look more like a politicians, or I don't know. It looks like a political decision as opposed to one based on policy and precedent and thought. And it's a sad day for the court, and it's an even sadder day for the country, where so many women will be hurt because of this decision, and families will be hurt.
And I will say the Brown decision, what we were just talking about, the court intuit about, that was a unanimous decision. Both Republican and Democratic appointed justices. This time, for the first time in its history, the Supreme Court is withdrawing a right that it had established. Congresswoman Carolyn B. Maloney, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Thank you so much.
Well, many facilities across the country had to pause when the Supreme Court removed the federal protection for abortion. Coming up, I'm going to talk to a Washington Post reporter who was inside a Texas clinic Friday when it suddenly shut down.
This is a really important story. My name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN.
Assalamu alaikum.
Day in, day out, you see the reality of people living through this.
Ничего страшного.
Okay.
This is the front line.
On a human level, you find courage, sacrifice. This is what life is about.
A lot of people are wondering why.
You see the worst of humanity.
Putin might use a nuclear weapon. Absolutely terrifying.
But you also see the best of humanity. My job is to be present.
The human cost is right here.
And to tell these stories.
We're talking about families.
That is the most important thing.
I'm Clarissa Ward in Ukraine. This
is
CNN.
What are the leading companies going to be talking about in the next 2 to 3 years from a talent perspective? It will be about skills. It will be about the use of AI to help their people develop their skills and to transform organizations. We know that skills are becoming obsolete very fast because of the change in digital and the use of technology. And it also enables you to open up the talent pipeline. So for example, in the US, we will hire 20% of our entry-level hiring this year will be into our apprenticeship program. Our apprenticeship program does not focus on 4-year degrees. It focuses on skills and potential. We also have a database of all of the skills of our client-facing people, and we can use algorithms to identify who can be upskilled into new hot areas.
Today on CNN. In a year full of challenges, let's salute those using their platforms for good.
It's just so needed, and we have a lot more to do.
Join us as we shine a light on some familiar faces.
I have gotten a front row seat to what heroism is.
Turning words into action.
It makes us human.
If we still care, there is hope.
CNN Heroes Salutes, hosted by Erin Burnett. Today